Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start really because allyship is so important. You're all so clearly passionate about it. But just top line, very quickly, what does it actually mean to you? Jacqueline, do you want to start off with that question?
Being an ally, what does it mean to me? It means listening. It means being there for someone who maybe is not visible. And I think seeing people when they feel unseen matters. And it doesn't matter how long that moment is. It might be that I take them by the hand and say, right, okay, we're going to get you from nowhere to somewhere specifically. But it might just be a moment which says, hi, and connecting. So I think it's just about ensuring that they're included in some way. That matters at whatever level that is, and there's a range, I think.
Love that. Thank you.
That fits very nicely. So this idea of being present when you need to be there, and the needs can vary, right? So it's not that it's always static. Everybody has good days, bad days, and depending on the situation, you need to be able to react. So I think that element is something which is really critical. Be in the present when it is needed, and I think that is what then will make the difference when it comes to allyship.
I have to say, just before I begin, it's a real hero moment or heroine moment here. I've known Jacqueline for a while, but she doesn't really know who I am because I've admired her, stalked her from a distance. So the fact that I'm sitting here today it's an unspoken ally role in my life. So I've admired you for so long. So I had to explain to my 11-year-old what allyship is when I said I was going to be speaking, and I had to obviously then think about how do you explain to an 11-year-old what it is. And I think it's really about how you show up and what you stand up for. There is an element of curiosity, an element of listening, there is an element of courage, but for an 11-year-old, it is very much about being aware of what is going on and who may not be getting treated the way he would like to be treated, and therefore how does he stand up for them and how does he speak up for them. Led to a very interesting debate about snitching, but we can have that conversation later.
Thank you. And Leigh?
I am a grey-haired, 53-year-old white man with a double-barreled surname. I am the epitome of privilege. And the reason I've got to where I've got to today was, I think, largely in part to the fact that the first 10 years of my working life, I didn't report to a single man. And I feel as though it is when people that look and sound like me actually stand up, does it actually have a big impact. I do it because it's ultimately the right thing to do. But I believe it has to be people like me that shout the loudest to actually have the biggest impact. So that's why I do what I do.
Amazing. Okay, I want to dive in then straight away and just tackle the elephant in the room. Do you think fatigue has set in when we now talk about diversity, equality and inclusion, allyship? Do you think people's eyes just glaze over a bit? We had it a couple of decades ago when we started talking about corporate social responsibility. Are we now feeling and seeing the same thing with allyship and diversity, equity and inclusion? Jacqueline, you're nodding, so let's start with you.
I think there's two parts to that answer. One is, if there is fatigue in the conversation, then maybe we need to reframe how we're communicating. Because maybe it's a bit tired, maybe we need to create compelling reasons why it matters. And particularly in my line of work, the technology sector, technology, diversity and inclusion and allyship, all of that is very noble. Of course it is. Who doesn't believe in an equal playing field for all? But in technology, if we don't have the others around the table when we're building, designing technology, then we won't create a world that works for everybody, because tech learns from itself, and we've got to be inclusive and create a world of technology development, implementation and testing that includes all of our voices. That really matters, and it matters more now because Gen AI learns from itself, and that creates an exponential bias. So we've got to think about that even more than before, and that's why it has mattered to me all my life, but also because I passionately believe in equaling the playing field for all. And we can do it. We just don't.
Yes, we certainly can. And to your point, you know, there is so much research that is there that talks about the massive benefits of diversity, of different perspectives. So, you know, are we saying that movement has been slow? And to your point, you know, we need to reframe it now?
I think we need to reframe it from a competitive advantage perspective, because businesses are under pressure and we're all struggling, and it's easy to say, let's cut this program because, you know, what does it really actually do anyway? But we could be more effective in our communication by saying, these are the hard facts, this is why it matters. Diverse teams make better business decisions 68% of the time. One woman on the board of a business can reduce the risk of bankruptcy by 25%. It's fact. We should do more.
Thomas, if I can come to you, you know, you've embraced diversity, equity and inclusion in BASF. And, you know, you work in the chemical sector. So tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that are really showing tangible results and making a tangible impact within the organization.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's specifically of an issue because we are part of manufacturing world that is notorious for having challenges when it comes to bringing a diverse set of people to the table, right? I mean, we are starting off with about 20 to 30% women when it comes to the universities, then they join us, and then we have the usual attrition rate. So for us, the problem is compounded. For me, and I totally agree with you. I mean, the research is obvious, but also simply the business numbers is, from my perspective, very clear. If you want to be successful, you have to do this. If you don't do this, I don't know how you should be successful in the long run, because it's simply the mathematics that are working against you. And I was fired up this morning already at 6:15 when I was listening to some news in German news where the German equivalent to the Financial Times had said, look, so the headhunters out there who are at the moment hunting for people, so they are now changing their search spectrum. So they are now looking for cash, they're looking for profitability, they're looking for people who are able to cut cost. And what isn't so high on the agenda anymore is the things like inclusion, mindfulness, and what have you. And I thought, what's wrong with you? I mean, number one, if you're working in a company, I hope that the what, right, the cash and the profitability is on top of your mind. Otherwise, you're not doing your job. And if you're director of a company, you're actually also legally in trouble, right, because you're not doing the best for the company. But on the other hand side, you can't just make this a black and white between the what on the one hand side and the how on the other hand side. The how will be the basis for the what. I mean, I was so upset and actually very happy because I knew that is the right place to be here today. Because I mean, how can you not realize how critical the inclusion part, the diversity part will be going forward for your business success? It's for me absolutely, yeah, like you said, it's obvious, it's there, the research is there.
Jhumar, can I ask you the same question, actually? I'd be interested to know what one initiative, perhaps, have you put in place that's really made an impact?
I could cheat and give you two. One is the Open University as an employer. I mean, we're not perfect. We haven't got it right. We most certainly have issues in certain places that we need to address. So we could be more diverse, we could be more inclusive, but bearing in mind the mission that we were set up for, making education open for all, from a staff perspective, of course we've done the right things. We've thought about, you know, how do we recruit, what are our recruitment practices. Interestingly, our publications, you know, how diverse and representative are they of our student base, of the world at large? So lots of changes have been made. Something that we did about 6 years ago, so the university has about 40,000 disabled students that study with it. We are also the largest population of serving personnel studying with the Open University. Makes sense that, you know, people who are in active service would be studying with the OU and carry their education wherever they go, sometimes in the back of a plane whilst doing an exam, or in a submarine whilst doing an exam. But disabled veterans in particular and their access to education is a real issue. Everybody focuses on rehabilitation and reintegration, but not necessarily on education. And we decided that that was an audience we could do something for. That was 6 years ago, and we've raised over £10 million and had nearly 400 scholars studying with us as a result. I think this is really what I mean by small examples of things that can make a big difference for populations that are underserved. Wherever you see a population or a group of people that are at a disadvantage for a reason, you can make a difference. So whether it's small things, large things, big practices that are cultural changes, or little efforts from a little department somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you can make a difference. And I think that's where everybody has a responsibility.
Yeah, I think that is so on point. I think everybody in this room, I mean, often when I do a lot of work with leaders in different sectors, it becomes this diversity, equity and inclusion becomes that person's role and that person's responsibility, and it goes wrong from that moment because instead of everybody taking ownership for it, it's palmed off. What have you found in your experience, Leigh?
Well, look, I mean, as a general summary, right, everyone in this room knows that diversity is power, right? And everyone knows that actually in creating that power, there have to be some uncomfortable decisions. I'm not worried about the people in this room. I'm not worried about the demographic of the people in this room. What I'm worried about is what comes next. Because our young people are growing up at a time when politics has never been so divisive. The world has never been so defensive. And the toxicity of gender now at the young ages has never been so rife. So I think what we need to do as organizations is not just think about our organizations. I think we need to think about succession. We as organizations need to push back against the politics of hate. And I think we need to use our positions to not just change our companies, but try and redress the imbalance that's coming along in the world. We need to make our young people re-believe in the fact that diversity is power. Because at the moment where there's so much insecurity, people are anchoring back to their own and saying, well, I need to look after myself. And I'm bored of saying it, but the Tate effect on young people is horrible. And young people are hearing messages that move them away from the fact that actually diversity is power. And I think we as leaders and organizations need to take our responsibility even further and think about the impact of where we are now in the world and push back against the politics of hate and push back on protectionism in small parts of society.
So what are you doing at Essentia to kind of rectify this or put the first steps in place? Because there will be lots of initiatives for sure that you already have.
Yeah.
But, you know, given what you've just said and how toxic this environment is now becoming, particularly for our youth.
I mean, I think at Accenture we are a little bit more insulated because we're a professional services organization and the people we tend to recruit don't necessarily get bogged down in that. I think as leaders, everybody needs to take the responsibility to go and speak to young people, to go into schools, to actually make their voices be heard with young people. I think we need to recruit properly. We need to go in and actually recruit in very diverse environments. It's not enough to go and pick people that look and sound like me. It's important that we go and find people who've got something to offer who might not otherwise have the opportunity to present it. But for me, it's less about the organization. It's more about actually people taking responsibility more broadly to actively go out into society and redress that balance.
Okay, in the spirit of collaboration and positivity and really being champions of DEI and allyship, I know and you'll know that sometimes the best lessons we learn in life are when things don't go quite right. So can I ask you to share a time when perhaps something went wrong and what were the lessons you learned when we talk about this subject and this topic?
In terms of how we talk about each other, I think this is a minefield because there are so many new words that are okay, words that are not okay. And I found myself some years ago just not using the right words, not from a place of bad intention, just not getting it right. And what I learned from that was part of me, because my fear of failure is so high, you know, I wanted to go and figure out, how to keep up with all of the new labels or descriptions. But actually, what I really took from it was that it's okay to walk forward even if it's imperfect. So that trying, as long as you come from a place of good intention, matters. And that to me was something I learned about getting it wrong, which pains me deeply to even say it. I would reframe it as a learning, maybe that would make me feel better. But actually, I think it's really important that we have the courage to walk forward imperfectly in a world which is changing so fast, and there are so many shades of grey and sensitivities. That for me was an example where I thought it was really important to not always be on point, but to ask questions, maybe be curiosity-led.
A few years ago, we were having an event, and there was a gentleman in a wheelchair, and as you would, I thought I was being helpful. So every time I thought the door needed opening or something needed doing and he needed help, I went and helped. And at one point, I think he was in the way of a door that would have hit him. So I decided to take his wheelchair and move him to a safe space. But I didn't quite say to him, do you mind? I just sort of moved him before the door hit him. Good intentions and all that. And we know each other well enough, but he turned around and said, would you, in a public space or privately, but would you touch my legs without my permission? And it's like, I don't really know how to answer that question because it could go in so many different directions, this question. And he's like, what you just did with my wheelchair is the equivalent of touching my legs without permission. And he didn't need to explain it after that. I fully understood what he had meant. And I think there are always good intentions, but sometimes in good intentions we forget that we have to ask the very people we're trying to help what they need, not make assumptions.
Great point. Thank you very much.
That visibility.
Great point. Yeah. Lovely example as well. Thank you.
I'll never forget it.
No, I won't forget it now either. I don't think anybody forget it.
I don't think I knew how to answer that one, I have to say.
Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, I have one story that is very equivalent to the one that you had heard on the newspaper in Buckingham Palace, right? So I bumped into one of our young colleagues who was from an ethnic minority, and with the best world of intention, I'm a very curious person. I wanted to try to find out where he was from, but not in the sense of because of his ethnicity, but I wanted to understand where this guy came from in the UK. So because I had all my trainings and so on and so forth. So I started trying to figure that out. And then he gave me a name, and it was probably nothing that I knew from my geography lesson. So I continued drilling down because I'm working for a scientific company. So we like to really get to the ground of where that is. Well, to cut a long story short, it ended up in the most embarrassing situation. And you know, the problem is you're standing on top of that rat hole and you know you will end up down there, but there's no way to get out of this anymore, right? So finally, I learned about his father being from Norwegian and from Norway, and then we went to Africa, and at the end, finally, he told me what I wanted to hear. He was from northeast Manchester. So. Again, best intention. I think what is really critical is you can't force these kind of things. These kind of situations will happen, right? But I think it's okay. People will feel that you don't have bad intentions. And he's, by the way, a very nice guy, boxing and all kind of things. So I've learned a lot out of that. But this idea of not forcing it, but just creating environments in which things can grow. I think that is something that is really important. And yeah, maybe don't be too curious sometimes. Maybe
Create environments where people really care.
Yes.
All right, Leigh. Last word with you.
So one of the best solutions to knowing whether you're getting it right or not is to have 2 teenage children.
I've got a 9-year-old.
Because I'm constantly reminded where I think I'm getting it right and I'm not. But one thing I found quite challenging, I predominantly, as a professional, solve problems. And my particular approach to life is there's nothing that I can't solve. But my daughter was subject to some fairly unpleasant abuse a little while back. And of course, protective father, problem solver, I just wanted to go in there and sort it out. And that to her was the wrong answer. She said to me, I don't need you to sort it out for me. I just need you to be there to listen and understand. And I think sometimes, as an advocate, you get so caught up in trying to be an advocate that you think you've got to go and solve all the problems yourself. And sometimes it's a lesson to learn for people like me especially, that actually you don't need to necessarily sort everything out, you just need to be supportive of the people that are trying to do it themselves.
Amazing. So we've come almost full circle because Jacqueline's first comment was all about listening. So on that note, we've run out of time. I'm so sorry because I could sit here and talk to you all day long. Jacqueline, Thomas, Jhumar and Leigh, our panellists, thank you very much indeed.